Hello, everyone. It is phenomenal to see you, everyone here. I'm really excited to talk about Gemini for Google Workspace and best practices for effective prompting. Prompt design is how to prompt a generative model to get the best outputs. This is becoming one of the most important skills of any end user or even LLM practitioner, and it consists of developing the best text prompts to really harness the power of generative model for your task at hand. My name is Pooja Jain. I'm a product specialist here at Google Workspace. I'm deeply passionate about generative AI and data security and privacy. I've been in the SaaS product ecosystem for the better part of a decade. I've held different roles throughout that time in technical advisory services, sales, consulting, and product management. I'm really familiar with the productivity and collaboration space, and I'm excited to talk to you about Gemini for Google Workspace and prompting today. So let's take a quick look at the agenda. We will be talking about Gen AI and some foundational terminology. Then we will look at the art of prompt design. So today's session is mostly targeted towards end users for business users, wherein you wouldn't have to tweak the code base or play around with meta tags if you have had experience playing with that to elicit a desired response. We will be focusing on crafting high quality prompts and how prompts interact with the system. We will then talk about Gemini for Google Workspace. We will then spend some time talking about resources and next steps to get you started. So make sure you stick around till the very end. And then please note that we will be taking Q&A throughout the session. So please feel free to post your questions in the side chat and my expert team will be answering them for you. So let's get right into it. In order to fully appreciate the context of why we are here today and how we can better understand prompting, it is vital to spend some time talking about Gen AI and large language models or LLMs. Now, Gen AI and LLMs can themselves be a separate session on their own, but I do want to leave you with some notion of these topics as it will give you a framework when you think about how to write a prompt. Now, AI is not a new concept. It has been around for more than a decade. For example, you must have heard of Google Translate at some point. It uses machine learning, which is a subset of AI, to analyze and translate text between languages. So, what is AI? Artificial intelligence, as the name suggests, it's intelligence, but not really. It is a set of technologies that enable machines to mimic human intelligence based on a series of equation or algorithms. So it's really our job as humans to guide the machines in the right directions. Now, traditional ML models would take relationship between training data and labels to build a model, and the model would give you a predicted outcome. Now, if the predicted outcome is far from the actual output, then the model would be trained again on a modified data set. I'll give you an example. If you train the model on pictures of cats and dogs, and then you give the model a picture of a cat, and then you ask the model to predict whether it's a cat or a dog, then it will predict it's a cat. So it's like a chef following a set recipe with given ingredients. However, generative AI is advanced subset of AI. It attempts to learn the patterns of content so it can generate new content based on what it has learned from the existing content. This can be in the form of text, images, videos, and more. Now, if you contrast it with the traditional models where you train the model if the predicted outcome was not right, in this case, however, if the output is not to your expectation, we don't train the whole model back again. Rather, we give better inputs, and that's called as a prompt. So, in our chef's analogy, it is like creating creative recipes every time by using the same understanding of a recipe. Some examples of Gen AI can be seen in media world today to generate unique and engaging content, such as blog posts, articles, visual arts, which need minimal input from human beings. In the business world, the generative AI can be used to generate reports, presentations, code, and other business documents reducing the need for manual input and enhancing productivity. Now, we're already seeing that generation has quickly become one of the most exciting fields in ML. It represents a new era of work, and the world is rapidly shifting to embrace it as it transforms how people do things, which is boosting creativity, productivity, and collaboration like never before. Business leaders across industries and around the world recognize that they need to quickly develop plans for adopting generative AI in a safe, secure, and scalable manner. And the organizations that adopt Gen AI will leapfrog those who don't. So, now let's talk about generative AI. Generative models work on the principle of language modeling. Language models are trained on huge amounts of data. Think petabytes of data, like the whole internet, the whole Wikipedia, the whole Stack Overflow, and they use it to learn patterns. So, language modeling means that the model is given some context, which is extremely large corpus of data, and based on that context, it predicts what comes next at the very core of it, and hence the name large language model. And then subsequently, computations are done on it to train it to predict the outcome through neural networks and transformers, which is outside the scope for today. So now large language models are general purpose models, which mean they are pre-trained on large corpus of data to carry out tasks such as summarizing text, complementing search engines, and recommendation engines. LLMs have billions and trillions of parameters. And think of parameters like as memories or connections like we have in our human brain, which helps us to interpret or help have logic to a text. So the performance of LLMs is continuously improving when you add more data and more parameters. We're already listening that this LLM has 540 billion parameters, and then we have trillions of parameters, and this is going more and more faster. Sometimes you need the models to be tailored to solve specific problems in different fields, such as healthcare, retail, finance. And in that case, these models can be further trained, but this time using a relatively small data set. This process is called fine tuning. Now, let me give you an example. So, fine tuning is when you train your already existing LLM on a small size of data set to perform a specific task. So, what do I mean by that? So, let's say you have this 5 character string. It was the best of in your prompt window. Now, the LLM is working to predict the next possible outcome and it assigns a probability to that outcome. Now, there could be multiple outcomes just based on these 5 words. The probability of the output depends on the source data it is trained on. So, we're making it simple. If the LLM was trained on the data from all the books in this world, it might predict a word such as times, which makes it was the best of times. And if the model was trained on calendar data, it might pick word like today, which completes the whole sentence as it was the best of today. Or if the model is trained on the whole restaurant recipe or menu data, then it could pick a word like chicken and it could complete the sentence as it was the best of chicken. Now, in reality, general purpose models or large language models are trained on huge amounts of almost all possible types of data you can imagine. So you can start to see when you write an open prompt and you give no context to the prompt, the model is having to run heavy computations through the behemoth of the data set it has been trained on to give you one plausible output. And the cost of running these computations is extremely high. And when we say the output is not relevant, well, maybe it's time to go back and check the prompt. Did you make it more specific? Can you make it more focused? So we will see how to do that in the upcoming slides, though, which brings me to my next topic, tokens. Now we understand English language, but then if you talk to somebody in a different country, then they might have a different language. So we do need a translator. However, large language models don't interpret the language in the same way humans do, or even machines do. So they use tokens, and tokens are characters or bytes, basically very small breakdown unit of a word. So tokenization turns English text into a format that the model can work with. When you write a prompt, it is broken down into tokens immediately. A token can be an individual character or a full word or even a punctuation. Now, how tokens are split, it depends on the language and the specific tokenization process used. So, for example, if we take a look at this example, evergreen trees are best. It's not even close. And so you might want to naturally break down every word as token. However, a token could be one word, two characters, or even a punctuation. So in this case, the model breaks evergreen into two words, and the word its is broken down into two with it and s. So it's we can start to see that even the words and the punctuation are broken down into multiple tokens. But you might ask me, why should I know? Why should I care about this? So you will often hear the term token size or context window. And this means that the number of tokens or words that the model can take in as an input to be able to work effectively. So be mindful of your prompt length. While longer prompts do tend to outperform smaller prompts, it is a good idea to revisit your prompts to see if they can be condensed. I'll give you another tip. Use chunking, which is breaking down text into smaller prompts. What that does is if you are exceeding your token size limit, then breaking it down, it gives you more area of coverage for the LLMs. Now, when you interact with a conversational Gen AI model, which we call chatbots, and we all know what kind of chatbots we're all using these days. So, I want to talk to you about that. It is fine tuned for conversational experiences. So, you would expect the model to retain the context of your chat so that when it answers you, it gives answers relevant to the context of the ongoing chat and builds on top of the previous works. So, what happens is every time you ask a question, not only that specific question, but the entire previous history of chat is also sent as an input to the model so that it can retain the context of the chat and also give you relevant answers. So, that's called memory of chat history. And you might start to imagine now if the chat becomes longer and longer, the input prompt can also start to become long. And we just learned about something called as token size limit. So even though models are getting better and better with wider context windows, and end users like us don't really have to worry much about it, however, it's a good idea to always keep summarizing your chat history at regular intervals so you can keep the context but make it condensed. If you have questions, please leave that in the chat. I would love to address that. Now, this brings us to an important point, which is prompt design. Before that, I do want to talk about cost. Since we just learned that large language models are trained on large corpus of data, so running these also requires heavy cost. And as a prompt engineer or as a person typing the prompt in the LLM, it is so important to be aware of these costs associated with running prompts every time because these models are extremely large with billions of parameters. So, focused prompts can often produce similar results, but at a fraction of a cost. So, something to keep in mind. This is also a helpful tip when thinking of costs associated with running a prompt. There are good resources online to understand the cost and the speed associated with running LLM APIs and queries if you're interested. So, now you can see why it's important to interact with LLMs in a way that elicits the desired response without boiling the whole ocean. So, prompt design focuses on crafting these high quality prompts with clear instructions that guide LLMs to generate accurate and relevant responses. Now, you might be hearing this term prompt engineering and prompt design thrown alternatively. There is a slight nuance and difference to it. While prompt design, we talked about, it's the art of crafting high quality prompts. Prompt engineering, though, on the other hand, it involves technical skill of understanding the inner workings of the model. So you would want to fine tune them to produce reliable and accurate results. Now, prompt engineering, what that looks like, it could combine elements of logic, coding, string manipulation, special modifiers, meta tags, etc. It's not difficult to understand, though, if you have some development background. But for today, we're going to be focusing on the first part, which is prompt design. Okay, so since the models are trained on extremely large data sets, it can tend to produce outputs that might not make sense or are factually incorrect. Because remember, these are probabilistic predictions, and sometimes a higher probability could be assigned to a text in a sentence that the model has never seen before. But as humans, we can understand the implication of choosing a wrong word, but the model wouldn't know that. And that is the goal of today's session as well, to understand why the models respond in a way that they do. For example, take the case of a small baby or a dog. If they don't know or understand the language, which is very probable, you always have to train the dogs in the beginning, or the parents are always trying to understand the babies when they start talking. It is very possible that the right translation is not happening. And so it could be either person's fault. But then it's our job to, when we're working with models, to really understand that sometimes it could give the output, but that was not the intention to create biased results. And there are some reasons why that could happen. The model is not trained with enough data. And when I say not enough data, it could mean not enough representation of a particular community. For example, um, if you ask a model, my wedding is coming up, give me some suggestions for food I could serve at my wedding. Can you imagine what the answer could be? It could say anything. It could say cheese platter, it could say chicken. However, the person who is going to be in the wedding, they don't eat meat. So one could assume that the model was trained on Western cuisines and might not have enough training on the global food cuisines. Second, the model is trained on noisy or dirty data, which means the model could have duplicate data or old data. Third, the model is not given enough context. So for example, if you're in US and your audience is in Asia Pacific, and when you write a prompt, you're not getting the right answers, they're not relevant, and you're thinking what might be wrong, well, probably it's time to check if the context has been specified. And then fourth, the model is not given enough constraints. So one thing here I would like to call out is models assume everything is infinitely possible in this world. They assume that humans are always right. So whatever we feed them, they're going to consider that as factually accurate. And they think that everything, there's abundance of compute power and everything that you type is correct. And so it's really, as humans, our job to provide constraints around your prompt. So as you can imagine, the first two options are beyond the control of an end user. If he's using a closed LLM model, which is mostly what all of us use on a frequent basis. So we cannot change the data set, we cannot fine tune it because it's already done for us. So one way to resolve this discrepancy is you can specify in your prompt that it must follow given instructions. It must not address any content or generate answers that it does not have data on or basis for. It must cross-verify the answers for correctness. So it's really the last two options that we as human prompters can control. So we will take a look at that. Models in general are getting very good. So it's no longer going to be a concern if you write one prompt incomplete or you mistype something, but it's always a good idea to review the output. So with that, this brings us to prompt design. So far, we have had a fair bit of an understanding of why is it so important to interact with LLMs in an effective way. So prompting is the heart of working with LLMs. A well-designed prompt will result in useful and accurate responses from model and considerably improve your experience interacting with it. So when working with a large language model or LLM, the prompt is the key to getting the desired response. So as they say, right, the output is only good as your input. So it's really important to write a good structured prompt. So a prompt is a short piece of input text that provides context for the output that we want the model to generate. The prompts we create can be anything from simple instructions to more complex pieces of text, and they're used to encourage the model to produce a specific type of output. Now, you might be thinking, if I'm going to have to spend so much time writing a good prompt, I might as well just write the answer by myself. Yes, it takes a bit of getting used to. But in my personal experience, spending those extra few minutes have been totally worth it, as it has led to generating some great outputs. So, like a good recipe, effective prompts include both ingredients and instructions. They work together to help LLMs generate better outputs. Here is a basic structure of a prompt. It has four components: persona, context are the ingredients, and task and format are the instructions. So I'll describe each of them briefly with an example of a cake decorator. So keep that in mind. So, what is persona? Persona is somebody you want the model to pretend like, what they're really great at. So you assign a role or persona to the model you want them to answer as. So, for example, when somebody is finding an answer to a mathematical problem, the answer could look very different for a mathematical researcher who has PhD in maths versus from a third grader who is just starting to learn maths. Or take an example of our business life. There are two users, they're both managers, but one is a manager in a high frequency trading company, but the other is a manager in a high tech company. Now, if the same prompt is used by both the personas, then it's likely the outputs are not going to be relevant. So they have to specify the context that the persona that they're assuming to. In the case of the world renowned cake decorator, right? So the persona could look like: you are a world renowned cake decorator. Your customers include families, newlyweds, and children. So it really helps set the tone to the prompt. Now let's take a look at the second ingredient, which is context. So you want to give the model a setting or a contextual information. So describe what the product or service that you want to be. What is that going to look like? Describe the user, their age, their interest, their needs. You can describe what the user is trying to accomplish. You can describe what the ultimate goal looks like. So in case of our cake decorator example, a context could look something like this: you have a well loved bakery known for its cakes. You also have a popular blog read by your customers. You're writing your latest blog. Your bakery has new line of cakes that you would like to advertise to customers. The next is task. So describe what you want the model to do. You can add instructions, you can add additional tasks. You can even ask the model to be fun and creative. Or you can ask it to not be limited by the constraints of today. So, in case of the cake decorator, a task could look like: write an informative article about cake decorating fundamentals. Keep the article very detailed with techniques and also discuss trade offs. So, you were very clear in giving very clear, detailed description of the task. The last and not the least, format. And this is something that how many times I listen from the people I speak with, that the output is not something that we're really liking. Is it either small or too big? It's because the model is assuming to answer in a way that it has been trained on. So it's really our job to specify the format in which we would like the output. So, for example, don't be afraid to say, give me the answer in a table, or list out 5 bullet points, or I just need an elevator pitch, or keep it concise in 3 lines. In the case of a cake decorator, a format would look something like this. The blog post should have only 600 words. The blog must be written for an 8th grade reading style. The adjective should evoke imagery of a prose and be brief, use decorative sentences, etc. So the key to good result is being specific about what you want and giving information to constrain the endless possibilities. Now let's put this in practice. I have another technique for you. So all of the prompts that we usually interact with our models on a regular basis are called zero-shot prompting, which means we're providing an instruction without an example and we're getting an output. But in many cases, it is extremely helpful to provide examples to the model to guide its response. And this is called as few-shot prompting. Few-shot prompting is especially useful when we want the models to respond to us in a certain style of format. Sometimes it is hard to explain what you want in an instruction, and sometimes it's very easier to demonstrate via examples. So the same thing applies in the case of models. You give them examples to tell them, this is how I want the output to be. Now, let's take the format of this particular few shot prompting. So at the top, you give it a task description. For example, you want to ask it about what is this particular type of wine look like. Example input could be like Chardonnay. Example output 1 could be it's a red wine. Example input 2 could be what is another wine, and then output could be it's a red wine or white wine. And so the model is learning based on the inputs you're providing, and the output would also look like that. I'll give you an example of this. So the same few short prompting, if we learn that from an example of sentiment classifier. So for example, you go to watch a movie, some of your friends say they really loved the movie. So that's a positive sentiment. Some other people will say it was a waste of movie. That's a negative sentiment. But then the third person says, I enjoyed the movie. So how can we train the model to give us the sentiment of this particular review? And so just like we looked in the previous slide, the top is the task. So this is a movie review sentiment classifier. Then we're training it by giving an example. Review, I love this movie. And you see the format. It says review, I love this movie, which means we're telling it this is the input, output. The review is positive. So the model is learning every time that this is how my end user wants to get an answer. So similarly, you give the example to review, what a waste of time. And then you tell that this review is negative. And then the last time somebody says, I really enjoyed the movie, we let the model answer it for us. And because it has been trained on examples, it will give the review as positive. It's not saying the user is talking about XYZ movie, the movie launched in 2024. The output is just saying positive because we told it to answer in a specific style. Now you might be like thinking, how is this relevant in my daily job? How can I use this? So I can think of a couple of areas, right? We get tons and tons of data, and sometimes we're all trying to find meaning from it. And a real example could be some professor or some teacher is an ed tech space, and students are submitting their papers. And so these papers could have particular sentiment. Is it a good grade? Is it a bad grade? And so if you train the model in a way that it can read the contents and you provide a classifier to it that this sentiment is positive, and then once you train with enough examples, it can start predicting what the other candidate submission might look like. Similarly, in the case of job hiring, some resumes might be more acceptable than others. So if you tell the model, this is a good resume, this is the example of a resume I would want to put on the back hold, and then you train it enough times, it can eventually start telling you which is the better resume for you. So next one is chain of thought prompting. So chain of thought prompting encourages the LLM to explain its reason. So we learned about the few shot prompting in the previous example. And if we combine that with chain of thought prompting, the answers are so much better. And it has been found out in research that they perform very well on very complex tasks, which require extensive reasoning. Now think of this as breaking down a complicated task into bite-sized logical chunks. This approach has been found to be significantly enhance the ability of the LLMs to tackle complex tasks. So let's take an example. I start by giving a standard input to the model. Your finance department has $23,000 in budget. If they allocate $20,000 for marketing campaign and add $6,000 from other savings, how much is the budget left? Now, you could do the math, or we can let the model do the math. It says the answer is $27,000. So just by doing a quick check with my calculator, I know that this is wrong. Now, how can we make sure that this doesn't happen next time? And this could be a very real life scenario. You're doing calculations using AI tools in your sheets, or you're using more sophisticated marketing campaigns. And so as a prompter, you should be aware of the things that you have at your disposal. So take a look at the chain of thought prompting. Chain of thought prompting says that we're going to force the model to think before it speaks. So we've added this additional line at the end that says, let's think step by step. And it's very simplified words, but it has very deep scientific meaning behind it. The minute you add these words, it tells the model to just not give out an answer. It has to give detailed step by step explanation of how it reached the answer. So if we take a look at the output when we ran through chain of prompting, we can see that it didn't just give an answer. It told us what are the mathematical steps it did. So initially, your department had a budget of $50,000. You spend that 10,000, you're left with 40,000. You allocate another 15,000, and now you're left with 30,000. And that's a correct answer. So when you ask a model to explain its chain of thought, the answer is usually right. This could be also applicable in our daily business life. When we ask a model to generate a user document who is actually going for job hiring or hunting, and we ask the model to create a list of qualifications for us, we can ask the model to think step by step so that it's not just giving us the top 5 hot skills that are there in the market, but it's really thinking about what is it that your company needs, what is it that you're looking for in a candidate, and this is why I think this is a perfect job description. So let's put it all together. So we have taken a look at the persona. So this is an example of a senior product manager at a top company who is an AI. So that's a persona. The task would look like create a product requirement document that outlines the goals, features, functionalities for this product called AI for Humanity. And I've told this prompt to think step by step. So when it gives me the PRD, I'm really going to see the thought process behind why it chose the goals that it did. And this is helpful because sometimes you do have to explain your rationale to your leadership, to your team, why you came to a certain conclusion. And so you want to come through a particular POV and not just something that the model gave out to you. Now, in this case, the manager wants to create a PRD for the whole team. But if you pay closer attention, I added this line, this is vital to my team. Now, this is called as invoking emotion. And the reason why we do this is to put emphasis. And models do understand certain things like emphasis, emotions. If you exaggerate, if you make something capitalize, if you highlight something, they do understand this is important. So I added this is vital to my team to show that you have to pay extreme attention to every single word that comes out. And then, of course, models can spit out anything, so we have to constrain them. So I have written this, provide links to support justification, provide competitor analysis, feedback. If you take a look at this last box here, this says, answer the following task. What is the state of the AI in next decade? And sometimes we're always wondering, how can we get the sources for our output? And that's where this prompting technique called self-reflection comes in handy. We're letting the prompt not just give an answer, but also self-reflect back on it, that did it really give the answer? And so it saves you one step. Sometimes you would get the output and you would click on resources or sources or check for factual completion. Instead of that, you can say that, are you sure? So the are you sure triggers that self-reflection. And sometimes I've noted in my trials is it does do a good job. It comes back to me and it says, hey, I'm sorry. I think I gave you an outdated result. Here's a better output. So I really like that it takes accountability if it does make a mistake. So let's take a look at how do I actually apply prompting practices to unlock the power of generative AI. So I've talked about prompting, but how do you really go ahead and do hands-on? And Google has taken care of it for you. Google is in the Gemini era. Across the company, Gemini is powering a variety of different experiences. We introduced Gemini, our largest, most capable AI model, and the next step on our journey towards making AI truly helpful for everyone. This is built from ground up to be multimodal, and Gemini can generalize and seamlessly understand, operate across multiple different types of modalities such as text, images, video, code, etc. Well, this is great, but then how can you test it? So you love the products, Gmail, chat, sheets every day, anyways. And we have taken the feedback and we have introduced all our native AI capabilities right into the products that our 3 billion users use every day. So Gemini for Google Workspace is an AI powered assistant from Google, built right into the Gmail, Docs, Sheets, and more. And this comes with enterprise grade security and privacy. So, from the beginning, Workspace was built to enable you to collaborate in real time with other people. But now you can also collaborate with Gemini, which lets you use generative AI technology easily. And we have tested Gemini features extensively with thousands of users who have leveraged these tools to help them get things done faster in their personal lives, including and not just limited to client outreach, job postings, project plans, time saving summaries, and much more. So it comes in three flavors today. In Gmail Docs, help you write, in Sheets, helps you organize, and in Google Meet, it helps you connect. So let's take a look at that. But one more announcement that we have made this year is Google Workspace customers can now chat directly with Gemini in a safe and secure manner. And this is a standalone experience which you can access through gemini.google.com, which was previously referred to as Bard. Now, this builds on our recent customer innovations, which we announced through Gemini Advanced. Plus, we have added enterprise grade security and copyright indemnification. By leveraging Gemini 1.0 Ultra, our largest and most capable model widely available today, we're able to provide insightful and expert responses to help people at work. Now, diverse teams in small, medium businesses to large enterprises can use Gemini in more sophisticated ways with confidence. So, now whether it's researching your data, looking for business trends, or complex data sets, this will all resonate with specific audience, and Gemini can help people and teams take work from ideation to execution. And we talked about prompting. Writing strong AI prompts opens up a ton of possibilities as it relates to aligning workspace value to tangible, quantifiable business impact. Writing strong prompts help you get the most out of your Gemini experience, which can positively impact things like helping you ramp new hires, helping reduce attrition, upskilling workers, helping to accelerate outcomes, and ultimately driving better customer experience. There are going to be a ton of horizontal use cases for departments that exist all across the industries, such as sales, marketing, customer service, etc. Internally at Google, we have been able to practice the art of prompting for nearly a year now, and we have been utilizing Gemini for Google Workspace on a daily basis. For example, help me write capabilities have personally cut weeks' time off for me. It has helped me level up my email communication and turned me into a more concise writer. So, Gemini in Google Docs actually is able to create text with ease, be it long form or short form. You have to just describe what you're looking for and watch Gemini in Docs get started for you. Now, when I talk to my customers, typically the struggle I hear is users are finding it hard to get started with new content and they have to deal with pressing deadlines. And it's at that moment the imagination just goes out of your mind when you need the most. So it's at that moment when Gemini will not only help you create content, it will also include smart chips for things like location, status, variables for details that you would want to customize, for example, company name. Gemini also offers suggestions for how you can write concisely, avoid repetition, and use formal and active voice. And now, have you ever imagined having an assistant who would just draft emails for you, that too in a crisp, concise, and professional manner, so you don't have to catch up on your emails? Well, Help Me Write in Gmail does that. It is available for enterprise customers now. The magic of Gemini is that it's also available in mobile. So if you're on the go, you can simply type what you need. For example, your flight canceled and you want to ask for a refund, Gmail will automatically draft an email for you. And last but not the least, We have also introduced this capability in Sheets. Users can now simply describe what they're trying to accomplish, and Sheets will generate a custom template that allows them to get started immediately. Now we've learned about prompting, we've learned about how you can test your skills now. Let's put both of these things in action. Let's see how you can take an input and make it into a phenomenal input with just a few incremental steps. I'm going to be walking this from the point of view of Alex, who is a lead designer at a tech company and user experience team. His job is to create a compelling user journey for users. And he considers himself very blessed to be very creative. However, writing and editing and modifying the content back and forth while also managing a team can occupy a major part of his day. He's also having to do user research and understand the pain points of the users. Now, typically, Alex would be researching and writing proposals now, but let's see how effective prompting can make his life easier. So let's start simple. We can start a prompt by saying, what's the user journey for somebody downloading an app? And this is a good prompt, but can we take a look at the output? So the output looks something like this. The user journey for someone downloading an app can be broken down into following stages: app discovery, app download. It is a good output, but it is generic. Somebody like Alex, who is a perfectionist, I'm sure he wants to see more. So how can we take this prompt and make it a little better? So can you think of some ways? So right now, I don't see what kind of app it is. Can we add what kind of user this app is for? And can we also specify what device, platform? Is it Google Pixel? Is it Google Play Store? And that's we learned that it's context. So let's add that context here. So I added young person downloading a new puzzle game from Google Play Store for Pixel phone. Now that's already a better output because it knows exactly what this person wants to do. Let's take the output. So the output looks better from the previous output because here it gives me the user journey instead of giving me the generic steps that you do app discovery. Here it's telling me what this particular user might want to do. This is a good answer. And you can see just by adding young person to the prompt made the response so much better. Now, how can we make this even better? I know Alex is a perfectionist and he's looking for the most perfect user journey, which has pain points and success criterias. So if you remember from our training before, we can add context that we added. Now we can add persona. So let's add persona. So this is our context from the previous prompt that he's writing a user journey, but now let's add the persona. So we're telling the LLM, leading expert in user experience at a top design company. So let's take a look at how the output changes just by adding a persona. And there you go. This is actually a really good start. It has sections, it has steps, it has success, it has failure, it has challenges, it has solutions. I think Alex would be very happy with this output. But he also wants to see more. He wants to see it in a table format. He wants to see how can the app be made better. Because let's be real, everything can be made better. Nothing is perfect. And Alex is one of those guys who's achieving for near perfection. So we can add the task and format next. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So far, we have had the persona. We have had the context. Now, what can we do is a task. Now, we are going to tell the prompt, you are going to focus on increasing the downloads, user satisfaction, and user engagement. Thoroughly document the steps in user experience to find, download, and use the app on your Pixel. And this is very detailed. So I'm not reading it. You can read it. And the last but not the least, let's add format. So the format has to be in tables and columns. Please specify journey phases, actions, pain points. And here's something I would want to call out is you can use examples. Like we learned in the few shot prompting earlier. Here you can tell it, like, go learn from this example. This is the kind of output I want. But here I have already specified I want pain points, mindset, opportunities, etc. So this looks like a great prompt to me. And look at the length of this prompt. So you might think, Pooja, this is an extremely long prompt. I would be tired just writing this. But if I show you the output next, you will totally think this was so worth it. So now let's see what this produces. Voila. This is what a perfect UX designer output would look like. It has tables, columns, well documented, journey phases, and not only that, it maps the mindset of how the user might be feeling at a specific journey level. Is he feeling indecisive? Is he feeling overwhelmed? And that is so important for a product person to know so that they can make their product better. And the output does that. It gives you opportunities to know where you can make it better. And not only that, it tells you how you can make it better. For example, you can use machine learning to recommend apps that users are likely to be interested in. So I really like that suggestion. I think the world is moving towards AI anyways, so it wouldn't be harmful to have AI in the products. Then it says use faster download servers, use in-app tutorials. I really like these suggestions. So this is a great output, and we learned that how you can just build a great output by asking follow-up questions. So let's take it back home. We should talk to the LLM as if we're talking to a colleague. You wouldn't talk to a colleague like, hey, training plan. Wait, what? What does that mean? You have to say, hey, can I get a training plan for my sales team for the launch of a brand of a new product? So the other thing is you can avoid using ambiguous language. For example, instead of saying marketing talking points, you can say, give me 12 thoughtful questions to ask the chief marketing officer. And we have learned that you can provide context. So instead of saying, write a sales job, that could be any sales job. So instead of that, you can say, write a job description for whatever job title, for example, a sales manager, a product manager, customer success manager, and you can specify, include the required skills and experience as well as summary for the position. And we have a whole list of learning resources for you. So if you have free time, please go check out the link here mentioned, Gemini, Google Workspace Learning, and I'm sure you'll be amazed to see some little tips and tricks can make so much difference. And so let's put it all together. It's going to be a little wordy slide, but trust me, this is going to really drill this and take it back home. So we learned about structuring the prompt, and structuring the prompt could mean providing the persona, providing the context, the task, the format. You want to be clear with the LLM. For example, you can tell the model exactly what you want to do. For example, give me 4 facts about red pandas. So you're saying 4, not 5, not 6, and about red pandas. You could have made it even clear by saying red pandas in Brazil, but I don't know if they live in Brazil, so the model will tell you. Now use specific varied examples to help model narrow down its focus. So we learned it in the example-based prompting where you can give some examples to specify the results you want. You can constrain the scope. Remember, models think everything is perfect, it's infinite. So it's our job to tell it, don't boil the whole ocean. These are the constraints you're going to work with. And for example, limit the response to 3 sentences and avoid giving any instructions without factual support. You can break down complex tasks into sequence of simpler tasks. And this is very common problem I see. One sentence just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Remember, at the back end, and that's why we did the learning before, LLMs are probabilistic predictions at the very core. So they're always trying to understand, but they're also trying to make prediction at the same time of what the next thing could be. So if you break it down, then it's better for the prompt to understand, the model to understand. You can instruct the model to evaluate or check its own responses. If you go back to previous slides, we talked about we talked about self-learning, where we said, are you sure? So you can ask the model, is this correct? And then last but not the least, you can encourage the model to gather information or explain a topic or cite a resource. And human review is a large part of LLM process, so please do not enter sensitive or personal information that you wouldn't want a human reviewer to view. However, enterprise models are protected by enterprise-grade security, so Gemini for Google Workspace will never train on your data, and your session remains private in your own tenant boundaries, and Google will never cross that tenant boundary. So I wanted to leave you with some resources as I promised. And you can take a screenshot or we can share this deck afterwards. But please leave us some feedback. We have Google Workspace community, and we do have a lot of Google Workspace events coming up every now and then. So please feel free to sign up and you can get lots of information. I do have a couple of minutes left, so I did want to show you how you can go ahead and actually try it out or demo in Google Workspace today. So I want to walk you through the example of a fictitious company, Symbol. Now, Symbol is a popular women's footwear company. It is geared towards millennials, which are between 27 to 42 years old. The average price point for this shoe company is $150 for a pair of shoe. It's available in North America. It is distributed through retail and direct to consumer online. And it recently launched a new women's speaker line. And I'm a marketer, and my job in this particular role would be to launch this campaign for this new sneaker that we're launching. I would also be leading the campaign preparations across multiple internal teams. And I would also have to report on success metrics for the campaign. So that's a mouthful, but let's see how Gemini and Google Workspace can help us achieve that. So, as a product marketer, I am just coming back from my PTO and I see that there has been some context already put in by my team. So, there's an overview of women's sneaker industry in North America. And this is the first time actually Symbol has sold sneakers. We typically sell dress shoes. So, before I even think about what needs to happen to launch a marketing, I need to understand what are the different latest trends. So what I can do is I can come here, call on my friendly wand, which is the help me write feature, and I'm going to give it a very simple prompt. I'm giving a persona. I'm a marketer. I'm specifying what I need. I need information, and I'm making it very specific, 5 latest trends, and I'm giving it the context in women's fashion industry in North America. So remember, friends, if you don't give specified the country or the geography, it's going to assume the whole world is a fair play. And remember, it goes back to the computational cost. These models have been trained on huge big corpus of data. And so why boil the ocean when you can specify the context here? And if you need to search something, remember, we have a very special, highly privileged tool called Google Search, which you can go for searching other facts anyways. So let's make the prompt effective. So provide me a summary paragraph. And I wanted to get some trends. So let's see if I can get some help from Gemini. So, wow, I just got all of that information in seconds, but I now want to make sure that I have the information specifically about women footwear industry. So let's see what are the top 3 brands in the women footwear industry today. So let me call on my friendly one again and then ask it to actually give me a comparison of the competitors. And that probably took 1 second. It gives me a very well organized structure of all the competitors in a table. Um, just converting text into table has been personally my Achilles heel, and just not having to format anything, I am totally on board. This looks pretty darn good to me, so I'm going to keep continuing to move on. So I often find it challenging because writing a campaign from scratch personally, it is a bit of a challenge for me. So I'm going to use my Gemini help to create a scratch for this campaign. So let's scroll all the way to the bottom and call it campaign. And then again, call our friendly agent here. And I'm saying, create a skeleton for me. I want to point out a few things here. The more actionable verbs you can give, for example, create, organize, and structure, the better it understands. Instead of using the passive voice, use the active voice. So start with the verbs first. So I'm going to go ahead and execute. Now, the beauty is that I'm not having to hop back and forth between different platforms. Everything stays within one document window, and I can start adding my colleagues and coworkers to instantly brainstorm. This campaign looks pretty darn good as well to me. However, if something needs to be elaborated, I can just go back, select, again, call on my friendly assistant, and I have already preset of options that I can do. So actually, I'm a marketer, so I want to have a little bit more information on the channels. So I'm going to click on elaborate. And the beauty about this is that it remembers the context. So whatever you select, it is contextual, and it elaborates only that specific text. So as a marketer, I love it. Social media campaign, influencer strategies, email marketing. This is all what I want to see. This is done. I'm ready to share it out. However, there's one last thing. I do have to create a sheet because I'm thinking about organizing a tracker. So let's go and take a look at this tracker for campaigns. This is already a pretty good start, but I'm going to go ahead and call my friendly assistant, which is in Sheets also, by the way. I'm going to tell it that I'm a marketing lead. I want to promote new line of women's sneakers, and I need a tracker to organize the work streams. So let's click create. And we can see that the same technology is powering our tools so natively that we don't even have to think about it. And the experience, we have kept it the same across our different products. And I think I really like it. It has initiative, milestones, deadlines, owners. So I'm going to actually go ahead and select insert. And this adds it to either a new sheet or you can overwrite the existing data. So I can just go ahead and add a new sheet. And there I have two tabs parallelly. So there you go, friends. We just learned about prompting. We learned a lot about Google Workspace, Gemini. We also saw a real demo of putting those two together. So I would love to welcome your questions. And if you have any questions, please always feel free to reach out. So with that, it's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us